Welcome to Those Who Do Podcast, a podcast about people, their passions, their vocations, their interests, and their lives. I'm Zach Barclay, here with the Joan Jett to my Pat Benatar, Tony Forsmark. Tony Saltzman is a television writer and producer known for Dexter, New Blood, Goliath, Feed the Beast, and Nurse Jackie. Most importantly, Tony champions the idea of collaboration in the creative process and thrives in a writer's room and team environment. He takes true joy in the success of others and was immediately open to sharing his successes and struggles in the entertainment industry. Tony's Forsmark and Saltzman take some time to give a rundown on the reasons for the Writer and Actor Guild strikes and what the respective groups hope to secure in aims of creating a working environment for writers and actors to own their intellectual property and likenesses, as well as maintain job security and living wages for both camps. Lots of laughs, a good deal of information, and some insights into the creative process that may run against what most people think of the entertainment industry. This is Those Who Do, Collaboration and Creativity with Tony Saltzman.
I'm not going to do a Japanese accent for any. So you were in an accident.
Are we recording this?
Well, I mean, that was the original plan.
I'm nervous
we can go
now.
away from that and just
I'm
do it for our own
nervous.
benefit. That would be fine.
You can or can't. It's up to you whether you want to put the headphones on.
You are wearing them this episode.
I am?
Yes.
Why?
Well, because you were all over the mic last episode. I couldn't keep you on mic.
I mean, I can't hear myself anyway.
That's
so
because I haven't turned them on yet.
So I don't think it's not working. It's not.
Hear me.
There you go.
Is this on?
Yes, it's on. Stop that. Okay. All right. Well, welcome to another episode of Those Who Do. Today, we have Tony Saltzman with us. Thank you, Tony, for joining us. I really
You're welcome.
appreciate it.
Thanks for inviting me.
I'm super excited to hear about your side of the entertainment industry because it's something I know nothing about. So that I like learning, and that's exciting to me. I don't know how much Tony to the right of me has told Tony to the left of me about the premise of this show. But the idea behind it is basically that everything that makes you is what contributes to what it is that you do.
Sure.
So we want to learn about, not just about, what you've done in the industry and stuff, although that's interesting.
Right.
What's far more interesting is who you are.
Okay.
Right.
Cool.
So we're going to start all the way back with what little Tony was interested in when he was 5. And
I was...
Dinosaurs is what you were interested in, like riding them to and fro.
Wooden hoop, thank you.
The stick. Yeah, we're going to have to come up with some kind of a system, aren't we?
No.
No? Do you want to be Anthony today?
I just won't use my name.
Okay, well, that's fine.
Yeah.
We'll do that. Okay. I'll crotchety old man and Tony. All right, that's fine. That's fine.
Well, who will I be?
I mean, you've been trying to answer that question for about 54 years, haven't you?
36, thank you.
So that's what we're going to do today. Today's just going to be a
cool.
conversation. It's not an interview.
Right.
It's just 3 guys hanging out and having a chat because so far that's been the best way to do it.
So what did you do and why did you do it?
Starting at the beginning. At the dawn of time, there was a great flash and bang.
So where are you from originally?
I'm from LA. My dad was a TV writer. I grew up in Westwood, right by UCLA. Yeah, and I had a much older brother and sister, 16, 18 years older.
Oh, wow.
And I say that because part of my journey was being in a rock band for 5 years after college. And that was because when I was 4 years old, one of my earliest memories was sneaking down to my garage and seeing my brother's band practice.
Right.
And it was like, what? Like, it was amazing. You know?
Yeah.
It was life-shattering, earth-shattering for me as a little kid to hear super loud, kind of punky rock music coming out of the amps.
Now, as a guy who has kids, like my youngest boy and my oldest girl are 14 years apart.
Yep.
So how'd that happen? What was the deal there?
A lot of people were rude and asked, like, so you were in an accident? Like, they just assume that. Apparently, my mom, decided as she was hitting 40, she was like, I want to have one more kid now. Yeah. And my dad was, dragged into that process. And
You what?
and then, and then she had me when she was 42, and my dad was 50.
Oh, wow.
So
Yeah.
I had much older parents.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and there's a lot to be said for that, honestly, because they probably were able to make a bunch of mistakes with your siblings, and then they could come in with you and be like, now we really know how to do it.
My brother and sister are like, oh yeah, your parents, like as if they're like different set of parents. Yeah,
those are not what we had at all.
Yeah.
The boys actually, my oldest boy, about 2 weeks ago, I was on one of my daughters about something, and she says, "Why are you always so mean to me?" And he looks at her and he goes, "Hey, look, man. You get medicated, Zach. I didn't get medicated, Zach. It was a whole different world where I came from." So did you find, I mean, did the relationship seem like a sibling relationship, or did it seem more like just a couple older people to look up to?
Yeah, it was. Well, my brother hung around the house for like off and on. Like he'd live with a girlfriend in an apartment and then come back.
Because he was in a rock band and had no.
Yeah, exactly. He was trying, like, he was in a rock band. He was trying to be an actor. He was trying to be a writer. Yeah. He was working at agencies. He was doing all the things before he became a psychologist. And so he was like a mix of an older brother and a second dad, and like a young, fun second dad or uncle or something. Yep. He was the one who our parents were like, don't drink. He was like, just don't drink and drive. You know what I mean? He was that guy.
We had that very conversation yesterday. Yeah.
And then my sister was like married and off with her own home. By the time I was 9, she had her first kid. My brother did too, actually. So I was an uncle at 9 years old.
Wow. Yeah.
So anyway.
So that was almost probably the niece or nephew was probably closer to sibling feel.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, my daughters, they became aunts at 8 and 5. So, they just run around. My youngest daughter and my grandson will be in elementary school at the same time. So that's
my gosh, that's amazing.
Well, I mean, my wife, her sister is 20 years older. So similar, it's and so, it's the dynamic. It's changed as they've gotten older, but for a while, it's like, it's just a second mom.
Well, and usually when you hear those stories, like in my case, I mean, technically the boys are my stepsons, so that's a little bit more traditional, I guess. So it's always really interesting to hear when it's like shared parents, but that huge gap in there. Mm-hmm. And obviously you weren't around for when they were raised, so you can't really speak to like how your parents differed. But I bet it was a different experience.
Oh, I think so. We had some conversations about it. Yeah.
Do they give you crap? Are you the baby and treated as such?
Yeah, definitely.
And you have no problem with that.
No problem.
Why would you?
No.
That's awesome. So you did the rock band thing for a while. You said, 4 years you did the rock band thing?
5 years out of college. I was with no.
What was college? What
college was Brown, and I was doing playwriting. So I was writing.
Okay.
I wrote my first play in high school when I was 16. I wrote a 1-act play. That was super fun and like weirdly successful in like a weird, like it was so silly, but like, and I really co-wrote it. I think that started my process. I always realized I love to collaborate, and I had a couple of friends who were very funny to me, and I was like, I want to write a play. Can you guys do it with me, basically, and you'll be in it. And then it was basically like a send up of our own high school. So like we got the actual stoner to play the stoner, and like we got the actual jock, like the captain of the football team, to play the dumb jock.
How do you feel about that?
Everyone was so game and so funny, and some of them weren't actors, and they were so good. And it ended up being so funny. And it was like people had very serious plays they were putting on, and our play was this dumb thing about who egged my car. So it had a story, which was like, I know one of you asked, can I swear on this?
Oh, absolutely.
One of you fuckers egged my car that's in the parking lot, and I don't know which one did it. And I think my dad was the one who actually came up with this, which was perfect because he wrote Columbo and Perry Mason and stuff back in the day. Mm-hmm. So he came up with the twist that they all did it. So like it's sort of an investigation where he interrogates them one by one, and then the very end, the twist is that they all did it together because he's an asshole and he learns a moral lesson at the end. And but it was super funny and outrageous, and we were like trying things on the spot. Like, so a guy was supposed to pull out something to show he wasn't there, and he pulls out a dirty condom by accident, like a used condom by accident. So it was like we were really like pushing the envelope, right? And that was like an improv thing we figured out like on night 2. So by the third night, it's like the most successful thing I've ever done in my life, honestly, because by the third night, it was like standing room only. Like it was like, you know, and there were these plays that were important and meaningful plays that other people were putting on. We put on this bullshit. By the third night, it was like 300 people were packed in the auditorium to see it because they all heard how funny it was.
Well, that's fantastic.
And, so that was my like, it was all downhill from there after that experience.
But did you hear about who egged my car?
Yeah, exactly.
But I mean, there's something to be said for like, if something is just a fun experience, like what better way to kickstart your trajectory and just being like, well, they're all going to be this fun, right?
Totally.
Right?
Right.
You know, having a bad, and I think that's why when I was involved in theater, like, I never really got chased out of it because I never really had a bad experience. And there are plenty of them out there, but I mean, a lot of the people who worked with me had a bad experience, I think, but that was because I was kind of an asshole and I didn't learn until later to grow up and be nice to people. But like, I personally didn't feel like I had a bad experience. So, and that's a lot to be said for that. And just having fun. You know,
there's so much to be said for there was actually a learning experience in that. You're right. Because it was like, because we were just doing it without any preconceptions, not trying to do anything, just actually trying to make each other laugh as hard as we could. Mm-hmm. And like, there was no expectations. I was like, that guy's not even an actor. Like, you know, and we just did it. Then like it worked. Like, and then I've tried things where I've worked so hard at something and it doesn't land at all. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. And the brilliant, the beautiful like experience of collaboration. I love writers' rooms. I'm jumping, but like I love writers' rooms because they're really collaborative, and I've always had that ability since that first thing to like just have fun collaborating and not be a big ego about it and just go, oh, that's the funniest idea. Let's do that. Like, I don't care if it's my idea or not.
Well, that probably makes you a lot easier person to work with and somebody that people, they're happy to have worked with you because no matter what you do, whether it's in the industry or just life in general, people, their egos, man, like even completely outside the entertainment industry, it's crazy how much the world is hampered by ego and people not being willing to give credit to somebody else or like, oh yeah, that was a great idea, man. Yep. Like I'm a supervisor. And one of the main things I do is somebody will come and be like, hey, way to go on that thing. That wasn't my idea. Like, that was his. He did it. Yeah. And they're like, well, you know, he works under you. I was like, I don't give a shit. That wasn't my idea at all. I didn't. I would have screwed it up. Like, thank God he was here, you know? And that just helps other people. So, man, I bet people tell stories of working with you and they're like, he was really collaborative and didn't fuck with us. And, like, he didn't take credit that wasn't his. Like, that's...
But he was a Laker fan.
Yeah, he is? I didn't...
No, I'm just, there's a caveat there. But, you know.
I'm a Magic Johnson fan.
But I mean, that's an important tool to have no matter what area you work in.
Totally.
Is to be gracious and you just don't hear that very often. So I'm proud of you, buddy.
So so playwriting at Brown, did that take a backseat for those 4 years or were you still kind of doing it while you were playing?
Music?
Yeah.
I actually, the true story of it is that at one point my band sat me down and said, you can't be Slash and Aaron Sorkin. Like, you have to pick.
So they wanted you to stop using cocaine.
Or start. One of the two. It's like, pick a lane. You know,
so I was still writing, and then they got me to put the typewriter
away for a while. Okay.
And make music my full-time creative experience.
What type of music?
It evolved. I will argue that our first incarnation, when we first got together out of college, found this bass player on the street, basically wild story. But anyway, there are weird things that happen. I believe this. I've been reading this Rick Rubin book and I'm obsessed with it. But like, he talks about how it's almost like a spiritual God thing where like when you really start going into art, like you let the art lead and then like the universe will follow. So we had this idea to do a band and weird synchronistic things happen to put that band together. You've had that experience too.
Well, we talked to Joe Stillman and he talked about serendipity a lot and how you have to be willing to follow serendipitous moments. And if you ignore them, you're really doing yourself a disservice. So that sounds very similar. The story was we couldn't find a bass player and we literally were outside posting ads, and this was before internet was like a huge thing, right? So we posted ads in front of Guitar Center and this Japanese dude was walking by and he looked at it, and for some reason I'm a shyer type of person. Like, I don't like to go up to random people.
but like something in me told me like I'm gonna go up to this guy and ask him if he's a bass player, which I would never do usually. The guy spoke like barely any English, and I'm like, yo, like, you know, like, are you a bass player? And he was like, I'm not gonna do a Japanese accent for fear of offending, but he could barely speak English and was like, no. And he said, I like the Red Hot Chili Peppers. I play bass. I don't have a bass here. I'm from Japan. I don't have a bass. And we happened to have our friend's bass and bass amp in our studio because we were trying to like use it sometimes. And so I was like, come anyway, which was weird because I was like, this guy's probably not for real, you know?
Right.
He's not.
Yeah.
And then he came in and he was like fucking Flea. Like it was unreal. He was like by far the best musician. So that was serendipitous. And we played with him for 5 years, and he was only supposed to be in America for 1, and he stayed for 5. At first we were very Jane's Addiction influenced. That was me. And I thought that was our best incarnation, and we were all sort of doing our own things. And then he learned a lot from it, but he took over everything in terms of like, because he was the best musician and the oldest guy. He was like 5 years older than us. And he sort of put us through boot camp on like how to become good musicians and have better rhythm and all that stuff, which was great. But he also took over everything, and like our sound moved toward more like punk rock and metal. Like System of a Down is like the closest thing I would say.
Sure. Okay.
Who I love. Yeah. But I don't think it ever worked as well as when we sounded a little more like Jane's.
Right. Okay.
And since he was the bass player, none of you got laid because you're always following what?
No comment.
I got a good buddy that's a bass player, and I always give him shit. I was like, well, like, I mean, must have sucked never getting laid. She and the drummer hanging out together, the lead singer and rhythm.
It was so much less glamorous than what I thought a rock band would be. We actually, I don't think I've ever worked as hard for less in my life, actually.
Yeah, try being a stand-up comic sometime. It's even worse.
My wife is a stand-up comic,
yeah.
So it's very similar, actually, going out and doing shows. And
oh, God, I heard one guy I'll never forget it. It Laughs in Tucson. I was there doing an open mic, and this dude's like, if you ever have a stand-up comic tell you he's getting laid by being a stand-up comic, that man's a liar. Musicians get laid. Have you ever heard anybody leave a club humming your jokes? I was like, yeah, he's right. He's 100% right. That'll stick with me forever.
So what brought you back then?
To writing?
Yeah.
The band finally gave up on themselves because we were going nowhere. And I immediately jumped back into writing because that's always what I felt. I had the strong feeling right out of college that I wasn't the person I wanted to be to write. I knew I could try to do like something, but it wouldn't be what I wanted to do ultimately.
So you didn't feel
I didn't have the
ready.
experience.
Right.
I hadn't lived like.
Did you do any? Were you the lyricist or?
I did some lyricists. I did a lot of the like music for sure.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So it was still a great creative outlet. It was an amazing experience. But yeah, I definitely had that feeling of like I just haven't lived. I don't know.
I mean that's actually very adult to and self-aware to be like I'm not there yet.
Yeah.
You know. Yeah, getting that experience so that you can build on it. I mean, that happens for actors as well. It's like you know, especially if you went to college and you know I'm playing some old king from Shakespeare, and I'm like that's not, you know, it's always been my thing since college is like don't have them do Shakespeare because they have no clue. You know, you can try to put it on, and that's fine, and it's good. I guess college is a good place to try it, but you really don't have any of the experience to be able to like, oh yes, I am this old king who has fought many battles. You know,
and it's really just you're basically doing a send up of someone else doing Shakespeare,
right?
Because you have no frame of reference. You have, and it's like what am I basing this on? Like, not only is it 200 years old, but I'm also not really a grown up yet. You know, like, I don't get it. You know,
yeah. Oh, 100%. When I went back and I was talking to the head of the department, I said that, you know, if there's one thing I would say after coming back, so after so many years, is I would have liked to have done more age appropriate work. Because when I come out here, I'm not doing anything that's not fit for me. You know, they're not going to be casting me as any of those other things. So I'd rather have in my back pocket the ability to be me. Yeah.
That makes a lot of sense. Yeah.
Point of reference. Like you got nothing. As a 21-year-old college student, you're like, hey, now play a 50-year-old king. Okay.
I am a Yeah, a 20-year-old, 50-year-old.
Please bring me this white shoe polish and I'll puff my chest out a lot. I think that's pretty much all we got.
So you started writing again with a goal in mind, or were you doing spec scripts? What were you?
Yeah, it was. I think I was trying. I mean, I always wrote. Like I've always had that from like, I don't know, around college age. I like felt uncomfortable if I wasn't writing, and so it was uncomfortable for me in the band a little bit. But I at least was doing music, so I was writing music, so it still felt okay. But the minute the band stopped, I just started writing. It's around that period I wrote a book. It's like a middle grade book. So I wasn't even like limiting. I wrote a book at one point. I know I was writing film a lot because that's what I always loved and thought I was like going to be like an indie filmmaker. And then I was always trying other stuff too. So then I was writing pilots too. And I was writing comedy, a lot of comedy back then, I think. And then I got an acting class, and that's where I met you.
Right. Yeah. And where was your dad at in that process?
He passed away before I started a career, and it's kind of moving because I remember my sister saying when I was about 30, let's say, I don't know, give or take. She asked my dad, she was like, "Are you going to tell him like, give it up now? Like, let's move on and like, you know, get a job. Like, you know what I mean? Let's stop tutoring part-time and trying to write, you know?" And he was like, "No, he's going to make it. He's a great writer." And that's touching to me. And I also weirdly, again, there's like spiritual, weird synchronistic thing, but like this, when he passed is when my career took off. And I don't know, but like, there's always that feeling of like someone from above, like helping. I don't know.
Yeah. I'm not gonna poo-poo that idea.
No, I mean, like if you feel it, it's happening, regardless of whether it's just what he left you with that's helping you succeed, and you're having that moment, or there's literally a influence happening at the moment.
Do you have a desire to write for Peter Falk? Does that come to
you? Do you sign everything? Just one more thing.
Just one more thing.
Oh, so when you think of life milestones, you come back to writing. You're doing that full time. You know you love it. You know that's your passion.
Yeah.
What do you feel that the first milestone that you reached was like? Hey, okay, now I believe in me as much as my dad did. Like, when do you?
So the synchronistic things that happened, which were crazy, were my girlfriend at the time. There's a few synchronistic things that happen all around the same time. My girlfriend at the time, she wanted to be an actress, and I told her about an acting class because a friend recommended it. And that's Beverly Hills Playhouse, right? Where I met Tony. And then we made a short film together because I was writing and directing little shorts. And so we made a short film together, and she told me after the second one we made, "You should get an acting class because you should learn how to work with directors." And I got really mad at her for saying that because I was super insecure. And then I was like, gosh, she's right. And I got into acting class, and I remember very clearly being like, I am such a fucking loser. Like, what am I doing with my life? Because I really felt it was a real bottom, because then she broke up with me, and she was like the one thing I had in my life. Right. And so I'm like, I'm such a loser. I've been broken up with. Like, the last screenplay I wrote that I thought had some potential, no one likes it. I'm starting acting class. I'm not even an actor. Like, I don't want to be an actor.
Right.
Like, what is my life sucks. And in that acting class, I met my wife, and I also met a friend who really loved the writing I was putting up, because the whole point of going to acting class was to write and direct scenes. And it felt really good to write and direct scenes, because then I could see it on stage, kind of like back in high school, right, and know, is it good? Are the jokes working? Is this working? Are people intrigued by it? And I remember they made me act for like 3 months first.
And why? And this is interesting, because this was part of the guy who started the Playhouse, Milton Gonzalez, was very about the collaborative process, number one, but being a holistic artist. And so
you can't just tell actors how to act. You have to know what it feels like to be the actor.
Right. And so, and you can tell the difference, right? Now, before and after.
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. And And it gave you tools of like, instead of just being like, do the line reading this way, it was like now tools of how like, okay, what's your evaluation? Meaning like, what are your stakes? You know, like how high, what's your point of view? What happened right before the scene? All the stuff, instead of just saying, I'd like it more like this. You know?
Right. Yeah. I need more blue.
Yeah. So during that time, I definitely was gaining confidence because it wasn't just me writing in a vacuum and then sending out to an agent going, I like the writing, but no. And like going, well, fuck, what do I do with this? Like, I don't know I felt like stuck. And I was definitely on the path of, I thought, okay, I started workshopping a script that was like a romantic comedy. And I was like, we're going to make this ourselves. We're going to figure it out and we're going to make it ourselves. I'm still kind of sad I didn't do that. But during that period, my friend in class, who was probably 19 at the time, kept saying, God, I love your writing. Can I show it to my dad when you're done with your script? And I was like, sure. I didn't even push for any of this. That's why it's so synchronistic. His dad was the line producer on Dexter. His dad was like, I don't want to read your friend's fucking script. And he kept pushing in the way he can. And finally, he pulled it literally out of the trash. He was like, fine, I'll read the first 10 pages and then I'm throwing it back in the trash. Don't ever ask me to do this again. Read the first 10 pages, was like hooked, and read the whole thing and was like, okay, he's a good writer. I'm going to give it to my best friend, Clyde Phillips, who's the showrunner on Dexter. He was not at that point because he quit after the first 4 years, arguably the great 4 years of Dexter. Anyway, and then Clyde reached out for me to be his assistant. That was how I got in the business. So that acting class brought me everything, and I felt like I was an absolute loser and idiot for going into that class. So take what lesson you will from that. But
we've talked a lot in the conversations that we've had so far about how being more well-rounded and having more than just a singular focus is so important to being more marketable and just being more human. I think that's a good example. Like, you know, you were so focused on writing, and then once your net grew wider and you're like, okay, well, I'm going to learn this from this. And then, oh, hey, now I'm meeting these people, you know, it really does. Again, we really like to point out how this applies to everybody, and like being willing to make new friends, have new experiences, things like that. It's so important, you know, like, I live in Iowa, man, and I tell you, it's pretty myopic there. You know, I mean, the friends that people have are the friends that they have. Once you're 35, you're not making any more friends. You're not picking up any new hobbies, nothing like that. There's a lot of miserable people, you know, and a lot of closed-minded people. So, like, regardless of whether you're in the industry or you're a factory worker at John Deere, if you open your mind to new things, it just makes your life so much more enriched, and possibilities just present themselves like crazy. So I mean, that's a good lesson to take from your story, I think, is that how much better things can be, you know, and it really took off for you.
There's a quote that I don't even know. I think Carl Jung might have said it. I don't know. I've heard different people talk about it in different YouTube videos, but this idea that like the place you're most scared to go, but you feel like it could be good, like that's the gold.
Yep.
Right. It's a different thing to come into a group that you don't know. Yeah.
I mean, there's no growth where there's not a risk of failure.
Yeah.
You know, if there's no risk of failure, you're not gonna get any better. You're not gonna learn anything new. You're in your little spot where it's safe.
Yeah.
And I say that because for my entire life, I've stayed in my spot that was safe. You know, this thing is a new thing. Like this is something that I finally decided we're going to go all in on this. And it helps that I have Tony, who's just as excited about this project as I am.
Yeah.
But I finally said, okay, look,
The what now?
Yeah, that tracks. You know, there's a monetary risk. There's a time, you know, I've got a family. There's a time risk, and all of that stuff I've used as my excuses in the past.
Right.
Because there's a chance of failure. And if I if I don't allow that to happen, there's no chance of failure. Now I'm choosing to fail. Well, I don't like that idea anymore. Even at 44 years old, I'm finally going, all right, I have to take a risk.
Yeah.
I have to go to LA for a weekend when I should be having a cookout with my kids. You know, I have to do that. I have to spend money on equipment.
Yeah.
And once you take that chance of failing, hopefully you'll fail up. You know?
Good on you. Yeah. It's funny. I heard on, I believe it was on the Shop at LeBron James show on HBO, where they were talking. Someone said something. I don't know if it was Braun or one of the other famous, very successful people on it. They said, I could almost chart how successful a person is going to be by how risk averse they are. And the more they can actually just take risks and deal with the failure involved in that, the more successful.
Well, I mean, in class, that's one of the things that Milton and the other teachers would you're not doing it because it scares you. Go to where you what scares you, and you'll find a lot more that is going to be more interesting to everybody, including yourself. Because if it's comfortable, sure, it might be okay, but when you find that uncomfortability, that you're going through it, people will respect that.
And to even further that teaching, like then once I did that class, I became comfortable because I made friends and I started putting up work. People liked it, and then that was safe. But there was the whole part of the admin part of that, which was really confrontational for me, really confronting for me. And now how do I get my work out into the world and make a career of this? And it was all of that jobs involved in that. So I did the things, the exercise. I got an admin thing and group, and I was doing things that were the hardest things for me were
self-accounting.
Were reaching out because they immediately after a few weeks they were like, don't ever put writing 10 pages or whatever it is. Like you do that anyway. That's not your goal. Your goal this week is to reach out to a professional and ask them to sit down for coffee and talk to them.
Right.
And it was so confronting. Like I hated that stuff.
Well, I mean, and to have a little background, one of the philosophies of the school and Milton was the 3 A's. And so it wasn't just acting. It was acting, attitude, and administration. Administrate your career. You have to do that. You can't hope to be picked out of a crowd. You have to go out and make it happen. Right. And there's this whole adage of attitude monitors success as well. If you have a good attitude, that's a wide aperture, things will come out for you.
I'm fucked.
But so it wasn't just, okay, we're just going to do the scenes. You got an admin group and you held each other accountable for doing things each week that were for your career. Not, like you said, not writing 10 pages, not memorizing a script. What did you do for your career? Yeah. Were you in the group with David Crane?
I was.
Yeah. And you guys held on to that for a while. Are you still holding on?
No, we're not still holding on, but we held on for a while. And I remember that was scary to approach him because I actually laughed about that him the other day because I was like, dude, you were badass. Like he just made a independent movie and it was really good. And I look younger than I am, especially then I looked younger. And so I came up and he was like, who's this fucking kid?
We were all he's pretty young, isn't he?
So, yeah.
It was like you and Nicole and David.
Yes.
Yeah. And I think it worked wonders. Your group did a lot of work out of that group.
Yeah. I mean, they're bad. Nicole's badass. As is David and Mark. And it did pay off because I wrote letters to my favorite people and got and they got to people like the Duplass brothers. I remember writing a letter to them and getting it to them. And I was so uncomfortable with that kind of stuff because it confronted me I had that thing in my head of well, I'm a failure. I'm not real. I'm just doing these things with my little acting.
I was the same way. I hated it. And I'm horrible still. I'm not good at it. Self-promotion is a hard thing for me.
Fucking hard thing.
It is. But we're in a bad industry to not self-promote. And, I think the other thing is we all know the people that are way too far on the other scale. And so we become, I become averse to I
don't want to be looked at like that. Yep.
Yeah. So I don't want to be them. So I thankfully, my wife keeps me in check. I mean, I don't think I'm ever in danger of going there, but I'm if anything, her and my therapist were like, no, you got to start owning some stuff. You got to. Yeah.
Well, we had that conversation when we were basically like kind of like blocking out what we were going to do with this. And, I was looking at some of the people that we were going to talk to, and I was like, oh, hey, Tony, so-and-so, we're having them come in and they worked with so-and-so. Maybe they can reach out to them. He's like, man, I don't really want to like use my friends to reach out to other people. And I'm like, how the fuck do you think this works, man? I was like, I get it. And good on you for being like a decent human being. Yeah. And you're not going to be begging, but like, networking is a big deal.
It is.
And, it's like, and I get it, but
it gets harder though, because as I get older, I wasn't the youngest guy in this class, and they're like, oh, we're going to go to these industry events or go up to them. I'm like, nah, I don't. I got to go home.
Remember the first time I came out here and we went to that industry party?
Oh God, that was horrible.
It was so
uncomfortable. Yeah, it was something that was for young independent filmmakers, and a friend of mine was hosting it. So I said, just come, and I'm like, oh my God, I feel so old right now, and it's like,
but you're there and you're like, I'm old, but at least I'm in the industry. I'm like, I'm old and not in the industry. Like they're waiting for me to steal somebody's purse or to roofie a girl or something. Like I got to get out of here. This is weird.
And while admin groups helped me with that, honestly, I'm going to say it again. My therapist helped me with a lot of these. Like I had this thing a couple of years ago, or I guess it was last year, where I was given an honor by Iowa State University.
Just last November.
And normally I would have just been like, thank you, gone to it. And she's like, no, you need to tell people. That was my admin goal. She said, you got to tell at least 5 people that this is happening. Yep. And I did, but it still felt weird, but it felt less weird the more I did it.
Yeah. And it worked out. I mean, you got to go as an alum, talk to the theater department, and they're like, it was a really, it was a neat deal. Like from the outside looking in, like it was really cool how they handled honoring you, and like it really worked out.
But yeah, it was. But I still had that imposter syndrome. Like, why am I here? Because literally, it was me for our department, and then there was these people like, well, he discovered this. He's a physicist who did that. Like,
this guy's a general.
Well, I was on Parks and Recreation. That's what'd you do? I was on TV.
But that is another through line though that we've been seeing, and I think it's pretty common in creatives, like creatives who are reasonable people, like that imposter syndrome. That they go into, even if it's not a new situation, like there's that ebb and flow of, am I really doing this? Am I qualified to do this? Do people really like what I'm doing? Do I like what I'm doing?
Yep.
And it's pretty common, and
it's real.
And it's crazy, to see, to know, like, look, like you've been doing this, you've established that you're good at it. Be easier on yourself, and
lean into, some of the things that come to it. Yeah.
But it's nice to know that a lot of people experience that, because that happens in other lines of work too. There's plenty of architects and everything else that are like, I don't know if I'm really qualified to design this building. It's like, well, you are.
I can tell you that there are people that I know that are on TV shows, like they're regulars. And like one of my friends came back and he was doing the show and he wasn't getting any feedback from the director or the showrunner. And they've been going for a couple of weeks. And he's like, am I doing okay? Do I still have it? Because he's getting no feedback one way or another. Mm-hmm. And so, and that's somebody who's been on TV for 20 years, he's like, it doesn't never necessarily go away, but it's how you handle it.
Right.
Yeah.
Just like anything else, acknowledge it, work through it, and grow from it. Like, I think is huge. So your first moment where you're like, okay, I can acknowledge that this is successful for me, is the acting class. You're going, all right, I can see where this is driving me.
No.
All right.
I really, because again, it's that thing of like, I wrote for 20 years without ever getting paid for it. And every time I'd put something out there, the agent would be like, oh, there's some good writing here. And friends would love it, whatever. No, we're not going to take you on. So I was like, there's some hidden key that I don't have the formula for. I don't know.
Seems like it's always about serendipity. It really does, because he's like, I've been doing the same thing, and then suddenly, oh, okay, yeah.
This person saw it, or it was the sun was out this day, so it was easier to
And so to finish the story, I was writing class, doing this rom-com, wanted to make that, and then was like, well, I got to get funding for that. Well, what do I do? And again, confronting, like, how do I do that? And I was talking, just about it, because that's all I was obsessed with working on that feature. Wrote and rewrote and put up all the scenes and shot shorts of them and all that. And it was cool stuff. And then I somehow was talking to my cousin about it, and he had a friend who was in the funding business. What was the freaking term for that? Like, he does
in the funding business.
In the funding business, like,
you made it sound like he works for the mob.
Yeah, he's an independent film. Like, there's a freaking term for it. Oh my god,
financier.
Yeah, like they're like a. Yes,
I'm blanking as well.
I think they were literally had their name was like the term for it. It's like so ridiculous of their company. It was anyway. The point being, they got that script, and this is the only person I ever went to, because I didn't know anyone else I could get it to or something. Mm-hmm. And my cousin got to this guy, and he like loved it, and was like, I think we're gonna do this. It was like they're called the packaging company or something. It was like something like that, and met with them, talk about confronting, went in, and they were just like, yes, this sounds great, and who do you want in this, and we can try to get it out. And it was like the big, and do you want to direct? I'm like, oh, I want to direct it with my friends who I've been workshopping it with. Like, they're great actors, and they have this, and it's based on their real story, and and then they were like, okay, cool, you got to shoot this, and I want to see it, and so we put in time in. We got our mutual friend who is a famous actor to like be in that short, and and then I regret how I handle all this. But again, it's so easy when you're told something's not working or something that you just believe them because they're the authority, right? And it's total bullshit. When I look back on it,
so many gatekeepers, and in our industry, it's kind of ridiculous how many for writers, for actors, for every level. It's like for actors, we have the agent who's a gatekeeper. You have the casting person, and then the casting, then it goes to the director, and then the studio. I mean, all those levels before you even get a yes.
Yeah,
it's like right. So it's tough,
right? So they ended up being like, no, you can't do it. We're going to try to get A-list talent. I regret, but I said okay, and we figured something out, some agreement. Everyone was okay with it, and then for like the lead or whatever, and then they like fell, and then they never did anything. Like, then we had a couple conversations. I think like they came in. When I came in, I was like, I'm going to direct it with them, and I had that confidence. They actually responded to that, and were like, this guy's a visionary, because they respond to that,
right? Yeah,
and like he's confident on stuff. But the minute it's like a poker player. I like gave up my hand when they started questioning, and I was like, "Oh yeah, you're right," because I that imposter syndrome, like maybe it's not that good, and maybe we should go with someone else, or someone else should direct it, and
Mm-hmm.
and then they lost interest in me. Luckily, and again, admin is the reason. Like, I had said no to being an assistant at this point, because I was like, no, I'm gonna make my own feature, and that's more important. That's my passion. I luckily, though, while I said that, because of admin, kept in touch in a very genuine, honest way. It was like, I really like you, and I like really kind of want to do that, but this thing's happening. And so then when I came back and was like, okay, this thing's not happening, I would still like to be your assistant. Is there any possibility? Timing worked out, and I became an assistant. And I ended up being an assistant on a writer's assistant on Nurse Jackie. Mm-hmm. Actually, not a writer's assistant, the showrunner's assistant on Nurse Jackie. And the timing totally worked out.
It has to be invaluable.
It was wild because, again, it's that thing of I was doing the same things I'd been doing, but then I'm like thrown in, and suddenly it's like,
I mean, and you're with the showrunner runs the show, and so
and so I'm watching all
insight into all aspects. Yeah,
I was a terrible assistant, but and he'd be the first to say that. But he believed in me and as a writer and stuff, and I tried my best. He knew I was trying, but I got to see him go around and do the editing and talk to actors and be in the writer's room all the time and do all of it. And it was totally invaluable.
Was the writer's room a new thing for you, right?
Yeah, I'd never been in one.
Yeah.
And it sucks to be an assistant in a writer's room when you're, especially me, who like I actually felt like I could throw in and I could write.
You just have to be quiet when you're there.
You be quiet, but you're allowed to like speak up every once in a while. But you can't sound good if you're in that position because you're overthinking everything, and there's just an unspoken thing, and it's just happens. There are already enough writers, so they don't want really someone else talking. And that's no shame on them because they were actually so supportive and loving and nurturing of me. But it's just a thing that happens on any writer's room. When the assistant tries talking, you kind of don't want it to work out because you're just like, we got enough people talking. Like, you know. Anyway, so I then again had that imposter syndrome of like, maybe I'm just not good at this because it's hard to pitch into this room. The minute I got to be a writer in a room, never again. Like I can pitch in a room easy. It was so much easier because I didn't have to censor myself so much and just think, I can only talk like once today. Like, so I better make it good. And then sometimes you say the thing that's way overthought and it's not on track. But if you're just freely in the conversation,
you're part of it, and that you need to do that. Otherwise it doesn't work.
And they listen more easily, and you're just in the flow of what's happening. You're not like trying to make that one great pitch, and it never works.
How did that affect your process then? I mean, having done all the stuff on your own, and did it free it up?
It freed it up. I learned so much I was around incredible writers. My boss, Clyde Phillips, is brilliant, and his strengths that were my weaknesses it's like Michael Jordan. By writing with him that much and like seeing his writing and having to try to imitate it sometimes and this and that, I can't tell you like because his visual writing was so powerful and so strong. It's stuff I now teach in writing classes, but the ability to think about what's this really about and getting the heart of that and then showing that visually. He's a master. But then there were a lot of other masters like that went on, and now they're all showrunners. I mean, really incredible writers, and they were so supportive. And I learned so much about finding like, that's where the scene should go. So where is a way to go that you don't expect, but also feels as authentic? And always fighting to find that. And they always were so good at finding that. And I'd be like, I thought of the obvious one, but like I didn't think of that one. And that's a scene that's a great scene. Being around them all the time and hearing them pitch was invaluable. Right. How did that flow into producing? Like jumping into being a writer then, and then I mean, after you wrote for Nurse Jackie, then I got a story credit on Nurse Jackie, the final. That was my third year being assistant. And then I got to be a writer for the first time on Feed the Beast which was wild because again, suddenly I went from like putting up scenes with actors in acting class who were, some of them were actually like legit, like kind of known actors, but still I'm suddenly like on set on Feed the Beast. I actually did get to be on set, which is a thing involved in this strike, which if we want to ever talk about that, but I got to do, that was when we would write half the season. Clyde did it that way. It's really changed since then, but we'd write half the season and then we'd start shooting and he'd sort of pop in between the room and the thing, and you'd look over, you'd be supervising your own episode, and the idea behind that was it was stressful because there's a lot going on at the same time, but it was cool in that you'd see it, and so if some actor was really popping or something was really working and we saw it, you could adjust the writing as you got to the end of the season to adjust that. That was the idea behind it. And so I got to be on set, like I was literally exchanging like the things I would do in acting class. Now, like a few years later, I was with David Schwimmer, and I was like, do you think the scene could go? It was so crazy. He was so nice. I will be on the record. He was lovely. But I talk to Zach sometimes. It's those moments every once in a while that you're in them, and then you step back in your mind going, I'm in this situation that 2 years ago I would have flipped. Yeah. And then you go back to it. But then you're also in the, like, you're saying the same thing. You're not that different a person. No, exactly. Yeah. You realize how normal it can be. Yeah.
I mean, I've had those moments this weekend, because I've podcasted since 2007. Like, this is not a new process for me. Yeah. With the goal always being that I could have something that people actually would want to listen to. And we've talked several times this weekend just about how, sitting down and doing this and having actual conversations with people. And then I'm looking across the table at some of the people we're lucky enough to have conversations going, I would not have expected this a year ago.
Yep.
This is, but if you don't expect it, also, it makes it a little bit easier to deal with, I mean, so you're not, and I'm lucky. I'm coming out and meeting Tony's friends. Like, it's not like I'm having to do this on my own and deal with people that I've seen on TV in a weird environment,
Right.
So to me, it's
comfortable.
Yeah, that in of itself is comfortable because I'm just dealing with people, and every problem is a people problem, right? But at the same time, I have had those moments where I'm like, oh, this is finally happening, after the math, 2007 to 2023, it's a long process, to finally get to a point where it's like, well, we might have an actual product here that's valuable, up until, and then I go to bed tonight and I'll wake up tomorrow and be like, I don't know that I'm really, imposter syndrome again, and then I'll sit down, I'll set up the equipment, I'll start editing. And I'm like, okay, we're good. We're good again.
Yeah. When this gets out of my friend circle, maybe I'll start feeling that. But
yeah. Well, yeah, and that's but that's the nice thing for me is because I'm kind of feeding off of you, and that it's more comfortable for me because it's just it'd be no different than if you came and visited back home and we're hanging out with my drinking buddies or whatever. Like, to me, that's how it feels. So it helps. But I definitely get that idea of just all of a sudden having that moment where you're just kind of like, huh. Oh, okay. All right.
Life has led me here.
Yep. Now let's get back to fucking work.
Okay, so Feed the Beast.
So that was the first time where I was like, oh, like, just because I was comfortable in the writer's room, I was like, oh, this can be a career for me.
Yeah.
And like, that was the first time.
Right. And that's when it
the first time. And it still wasn't easy. Like, yeah. We can talk about it if you want, but
yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, I mean, because then there was the process of like, oh, like I'm only getting jobs through Clyde. Now there's the imposter syndrome of like, am I actually good, or is it just because he likes me and I'm comfortable in rooms with him? Like, so then I had to go over that barrier. And there was a period where I had kids at this point, and I was unemployed for 10 months straight, and we were getting down to it, and I was like, oh. I was looking up the CBEST, and I was like, I'm going to be teaching high school, like, because I do love teaching and I do love tutoring. Like, I did it, and it's just the way the cookie crumbles, I guess, because like I can't just not support my family. Like, I got 2 kids now. That's not an option. And
let's get the band back together.
Yeah. And during that time, another kind of synchronistic stuff happened. During that time, I was like, well, at least I'll teach a writing class. And I had still, at this point, never written a script where they took it out and like some showrunner was like, oh, I love that script. I'm hiring you. It was still jobs through Clyde. So I had one level of like, I'm comfortable in a writer's room. I know people like me in a writer's room, and I do good work when I'm asked to write a script. Right. So I'm there. Still don't have a script that like I'm going out and getting jobs. Right.
On. This isn't a story by Tony Saltzman. It's all your IP.
Right. Yeah. Right. So at that point, I'm doing this writing class, and I was like, oh shit. Okay. I want to do this writing class, and what am I going to teach them? And I realized I'd read Save the Cat before, at some point, but I was really actually very resistant to reading stuff about how to, like, I was like, I know how to write. I've been writing since I was 16, whatever. And I finally was like, okay, I'm going to sit down and figure out what to teach. I'm going to teach this class on writing a pilot. Like, I got to teach something. And I watched all my favorites. I watched actually from the incoming class. I asked them their favorites. I wrote all of those. And I thought about everything I'd learned in all my writers' rooms and from all the brilliant writers I've been around. And I started coming up with like a little bit of a curriculum. Right. But really mostly that first class was I taught like 10 questions to ask. And I said, if you'll look at all your favorites, they're very interesting answers to those in their pilot. I was like, I'm going to treat this as because I need a pilot that I can take out. Right. But I was literally at this point, like giving up. I was gonna do
this is what we're gonna do. Yeah.
And all in the past, I'd written a version of a pilot and then gotten notes from my friends and from Clyde and then had different thoughts. Oh, which direction? And had a lot of a lot of struggle about like, oh, I'll try this direction. I'll try this direction. Do people like this? Oh, this person likes this, but this person doesn't. And but once I taught that class and was like, this is, to help guide you as a North Star. And I was writing my pilot in that class. that was the pilot that got me my first job. I was recommended by a friend from Feed the Beast, actually, but then I gave them that pilot that I hadn't shown anyone yet,
right?
Which was crazy, but like it felt like it was a good enough fit for the show it was, and I got hired on that job. And then I had like a good run since then of a lucky sort of things happen that I got from job to job for a while until the strike. Yeah. So anyway. It's like that was the final. That writing that really helped. That was like the final thing.
Right.
I'm not that I don't still have imposter syndrome, but like I was like, okay, now I got my own job through my own writing. Like that felt really good.
Well, and and even though it was you got it from somebody else. I mean, that's kind of the way the Beast works. I mean, you make relationships. You make that's any job. It's like you have to be willing to not take advantage of, but welcome. People giving you're like, hey, I think you'd be good for this.
Nobody, no matter what somebody says, very few if anybody is self-made.
Right.
Yeah. I think it's partly the fear thing. You want to just write it in your own room and not have anything, and then just be like, you're brilliant.
100%.
But there's also, there's a meritocracy thing. Like you want people to get it from being great writers. The thing is that it's a combo, because even if you've written a great pilot, you don't know, like that could have taken that person 10 years. It could be a story so specific to them. You don't know how they're going to be in a writer's room. Like it doesn't always equate. Sometimes it does. And, but that person may be a brilliant writer and it wouldn't fit in that room per se. So it's tricky. So it does help to have the person who says, I was in a writer's room with them. When you give them the assignment, they will get you that script. They'll know how to mimic your voice that you want. They'll know how to tell the story you want and get it to you quickly and all of that. Like it helps to have someone vouching for you.
Well, you may have a badass script, and if it can't get to the right person, that doesn't make it not a badass script.
Absolutely.
So it's like nobody wants to lose a buck. So,
but it's a crappy catch-22.
Yeah.
It's a really crappy catch-22.
It's a flawed system that has existed for...
It's tough.
A century.
And obviously there's like it benefits people who have enough money to like intern and be an assistant and make a little money and and to get in the door as an assistant, all that.
I'll go back to going into writer producer.
Yes.
How did
it's not that, it's just titles. Because I was more writer producer in some respects. I mean, I was a big time on the last show I was on because I was the number 2 on that show. And so it was a real responsibility, which was, again, scary and uncomfortable. But like on Feed the Beast, I got to supervise my own episode. But then there were shows where I was, it's like the title goes up as it's a hierarchy thing, right? So you're staff writer, then story editor, then executive story editor, then co-producer, then producer, then co-executive producer, then executive producer. So you just go up the rungs as you go. You keep getting jobs and go up. But as a story editor, on Feed the Beast, I actually got to be on set, but as a co-producer, I didn't. So
right.
So it's kind of a title.
People don't understand it. I think it kind of got highlighted with what this whole Alec Baldwin thing of what's a producer,
right?
We know that could be anything. For him, it's like, I'll be in your movie. I want credit, but I want producer credit so I can get some back end on it. And it has nothing to do with the day to day.
He's not actually overseeing the day to day production. That's other people.
It could be I'm a line producer and I have nothing to do with I'm doing the bookkeeping. It's so when somebody says the producers we'll go to the strike. Those are the money people. Those are the decision people. Those are when you think of a producer. That's what we think of.
Right.
We're like, who's producing this? That's what we're what we're talking about, and what everybody assumes when we say producer for these other titles. It's not that.
Okay, so that brings up a good point for the people listening. Like if it wasn't a bullshit title, like if you're talking about the actual job of a producer, what is that?
Well, it depends. I mean, it's not a bullshit title to say a line. I'm trying to clarify. Like if you're a below the line type of producer, like if you are a line producer, that person is functionally producing the show as their job. I mean, they're writing out the bills, making sure.
Comes in on budget.
It comes in on budget and hiring and all that. For the money people the money people are the producers. Okay. But there are titles of producer that's their job. And then there's, co-producer,
the writer who are just writers.
Who are just writers or depending on whether it's a movie, somebody that
they help you on set and they help make sure it's working.
Right. And so it's a kind of a misleading term because it's overused a little bit. I mean, it loses its power in our lexicon to say you're a producer. Like, then
which kind?
Yeah. What does that mean?
Well, and when I said bullshit title, it was about like the Alec Baldwin thing where it's like, call me a producer.
Well, by being called a producer, there's money involved in that.
And
he'll get money, but what duty was he performing other than bringing his? And that was my point.
So,
not the day to day, but I mean, he might have creative
control. Exactly, there might be some creative control, and because he is a producer, that also for him might be a form of remuneration. Like if they don't have a huge budget, he could say, well, yes, I will do it for a lower amount of money, but you have to make me a producer. So that's how I get paid.
Right.
That's that level of producer. Whereas we're going to be talking to some people that are line producers and completely different. I mean, he's more of a office worker. I mean, not in the sense of, trying to diminish that job, but I mean, it's not
at all, because they can be, I mean, a great line producer.
Yeah.
I know some. They're very creative. I mean,
and they're invaluable.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean,
getting sets that work and how to like shoot the vision that the showrunner has, but keep it in budget. And there are creative ways to do that.
Right. And without them, nothing flows. But very often not on set, depending on one of our friends, he does a lot of it from home because it's a lot of the hiring, firing, booking type of stuff. And he rarely goes on set, but on other jobs, he will go on set because he needs to see what's going on to be able to do it.
Right.
Whereas, the money people, half the time they're not even there. That's,
they provided their service.
100%, and then that's
they give notes. It's also there's those that give notes.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's all important information to have because the other side of the humanity of this project is also kind of clarifying when someone has a thing that they do what that thing actually is.
Right.
So that's an important distinction.
And when you talk about who's your boss, showrunner, producer, that's the boss.
Right.
Which I guess we can kind of segue into. We're both on strike right now.
Mm-hmm.
And people are like, well, what does that mean for us to be on strike?
Mm-hmm.
And we are basically striking against the studios, the money people, not, against a director or anything like that.
Sure.
We have our contracts with the money people. So the producers are organized in their own group, and he's a Writers Guild, I'm Screen Actors Guild. And so we have to have contracts with them. Well, we demand contracts with them. And so you can speak to what you're looking for. What are the writers looking for?
First of all, I don't want to because I'm not going to be an expert on this. But some of the things are, okay, so there's been a shift. As we all know, it used to be broadcast TV, 24 episodes of shows often. Mm-hmm. There's been a big move toward a lot of the hit shows are 10 episode, 8-episode seasons on streamers, right? So it's very different formula. So there are a couple of things. One is they used to pay residuals, which is if your show does well and keeps airing on TV, you get paid a small percentage, but a percentage of that money that keeps getting made.
Yeah, because they're getting ad revenue.
Because they keep getting paid, yeah. So you still get your little chunk. And the streamers don't pay residuals. So, and people keep watching it years later, or they'll sell it to another place, and then it keeps getting watched, and no one sees any money from that. I have a good friend who worked on the Dexter New Blood series with me, and then worked on Dahmer right after that. And I don't know the numbers because they don't share the numbers, but Dahmer was a huge hit, as was Dexter New Blood.
Right.
And he gets nice residuals from Dexter New Blood and doesn't get any on Dahmer. So, because Dahmer was on Netflix and Dexter was on Showtime. Okay, so there's that. Then because of the smaller, it's like these like 8 or 10 episode runs, they're looking at like, do we really need a big writer's room? Like it used to be like you'd have 10 writers in a room, batting around, and you need that many to write 24 episodes. You don't need that for an 8-10 episode run necessarily. I've been really lucky to work with Clyde a lot, and he likes 7 or 8 writers in a room, sometimes even 9. He really advocates for writers. He's a great advocate for writers, and always says it's the cheapest money you can spend. If the writing's good, the rest often, not that everything else is important, the actors and directors, but like it's just the base for everything.
Right.
So it's like, and it's cheap. Foundation. It's like one day on set is $1 million or whatever it is. It's a lot of money. Paying a writer to be on, paying one more writer is not that much money, as one day on set. So it's like, spend that money and get good writing group and let me do this the way I want to do it. And they, to their credit, like the places have always agreed with them.
Right.
But there are lots of stories of them wanting to spend as little as possible on the writers. So, okay, we have our showrunner, we have the showrunner creator, let's get them have couple other writers and try to see if they just the 3 of them or the 4 of them can like knock out 8 episodes or 10 episodes, and they're going to work really hard, but okay, but
yeah, we won't be spending all that salaries on other people,
and they'll work harder and make less money.
I say salary.
Awesome.
And so I mean, again, writers, I will always say, like, get paid well. The issue is, and that's because our union has always been a good union. Like, they've always fought for everything. And so that's why we get paid well, I think. With that said, like, yeah, if there are only 3 or 4 writers in a room, then they're obviously going to choose writers that are experienced. So now suddenly, how does a young writer get into this business and have the experience I had of being like going from staff writer to this, to that, and working their way up and learning if there's no job for you? Right. So that was a big part, and that's why, and it's a big sticking point, is this minimum room thing, because I am pretty clear that it's because the viability of this as a career, so that young writers we can keep this process moving forward of writers learning. And I think they offer something like, well, we'll do an internship, and it's like,
it's not the same, right?
It's not. We had a system in place that's worked.
A branch of that also is when you're doing 26 episodes, that's several months of work.
It's a year of work.
Yeah. Almost a year of work. Yeah. I mean, and so when writers were on a show, you were good for that year.
Yeah.
But if you're only doing 9 episodes and it might come back, it might not come back. Yep. So do you go to another show if you can?
Oh, and it's usually like a year between.
Yeah.
So you're not going to be work for a year? No, you can't do that. So right. It is become a job where like you're on for 5-6 months, probably 5, and then you have to look for your next job. Right. So it's really challenging.
On the other
so
hand, unstable. They want you back the next. If they can, they're like, oh, well, you're not free? How are you not free? Yeah.
Usually you can. My experience has been that when push comes to shove, like you can. I don't know. You usually can go. And you kind of have to clear it with the showrunner, and the showrunners, we're all friends, so they get it.
Yeah,
like, of course you can't just.
But it is a deal.
Yes,
that is different than it used to be. Yes. Right.
Well, and the streaming. Could you imagine 20 years ago an NBC show finishing its season in, late March or something, and then being like, well, we're not coming back for 2 years.
Right.
Like that is not a thing. People would have lost their minds. And now with streaming, it's like, hey, when did The Witcher end? I don't know, like 3 years ago. Oh, we'll bring out season 2 here in another 6 months.
Right.
Like,
right.
Yeah, it's an insane, but it's just accepted now.
Yeah.
And it's like, you can't sustain yourself and your family on a job maybe coming back next year, maybe coming back 3 years from now. That's insane.
Right.
I'm going to touch a little bit on what we are.
Well, before you go too much further, what about AI? Is that a point in the?
Sure, because I'm still not. Yes, because and this is I'll speak for myself. I think it's a concern people have. Like, AI can't write scripts that are great yet. Mm-hmm. But like, if you feed them all the best scripts, can they do mashups of different scripts and pull out something decent?
And that's my thing. Is it
in like 3 or 4 years, will they start being able to put out something decent that like kind of works? But even if it just kind of works. And by the way, they can already, I feel like, do plot lines and stuff, like, and give you like, here are 10 different ideas for the plot line for that Law and Order season, whatever. Then could you just have 2 writers in a room and an AI machine?
Massage it. Yeah.
And the writers can make it more human and real and better. And but you get plot lines and you get some ideas and scenes and stuff from an AI machine. Now you're taking what was already shrinking.
Yep.
Like now you have like, you only need like 2 writers and an AI machine in a room.
On top of that,
for most shows,
and I think Chelsea Handler is dealing with some of this. Is what you fed into that machine is already somebody else's
Someone
IP.
else's IDs,
right? And so they're not getting anything for training this machine,
right?
Yeah.
Well, and is that one of the items being negotiated on as part of the, okay, that was.
And we're in a similar situation where, at least on the AI is a concern, but not as much as it is for the writers right now, because what they want to do and have done is like they've scanned background people, background actors up till now without their knowledge of what it was going to be used for. Background people don't have nearly the protections that the lead actors would, and they scan them so that they can use them, and they digitize them, and then they just put them into scenes.
Right.
It's not going to work for a procedural. I mean, you're not going to have fake people walking back and forth, but
yet.
Yeah, I mean, and this goes to what you were saying about writing a script. I read somewhere where they tried to fed in all of George R.R. Martin's work to see if they could finish the last 2 books. And it did a real good job of bringing characters in and back and stuff like that. But what it didn't do well is like it would never kill off a character. It doesn't know how to do what Martin is known for.
I was going to say that's a very different story then.
Exactly. Well, that's the whole thing is, these grisly ways of dying. Nobody died, and so it's the human concept of what makes this interesting.
It's also very bad at its hands. Very bad at the hands.
Yeah. So they're that's why I have a little less concern about them totally taking over, but I do understand the fewer writers. Yeah, we'll get the storyline and then we'll massage it and humanize it,
at least just to like speed the process up.
Right, but for us, our bigger thing is what you were talking about before is the streamers, because when we do episodic TV normally, we much like Tony. Or a movie, anytime it's shown on TV, we get money. We get a share of what it made on ad revenue. We get 0 for when it's on Netflix, and more people are watching it than were before. Anecdotally, there's an actress that was on Orange is the New Black, and she goes and she's in New York, and people know who she is. Mm-hmm. She gets maybe a 10-cent residual check. She's not making any more money off of Orange is the New Black, period. The producers are. Mm-hmm. They're, and it's her work. It's the writer's work. It's the producers are entitled to make money off of what they invested in. But, the product is us. Our things are the product, and we're not getting anything. And so that's the main sticking point for us is we need to have some sort. And they, like you said, they don't reveal the numbers. Mm-hmm. They will not tell you how many eyeballs have been, watching X, Y, or Z. She said that this actress from Orange is the New Black said, we were told at the time we had better numbers, bigger numbers than Game of Thrones. And she's like, okay, well, where's my Game of Thrones money?
Right.
And and she's looking for a part-time job.
Well, and my other question is, you talked about Showtime, So Showtime also has a streaming service. Right. So the residuals probably only come from the cable viewings then? Or does Showtime work something out?
I don't know.
It's a slightly different because
I know I'm getting residuals for Dexter.
Exactly. There's a difference between, say, Showtime, Cinemax, and HBO because they're producing those.
Right, but they're probably also still airing on the cable service.
They are, but and there is a difference between when Netflix picks up, say, something that I was on, 10 years ago. That's different than in-house stuff that they've produced themselves, new stuff. not much difference on Netflix, but HBO handles it differently. They actually handle it as if it were a first run television event. Whereas if like I was in documentary now, when it was on IFC, I got paid every time it was on IFC. Now that it's on Netflix, nothing. Right. Because it wasn't theirs, they just bought the rights to air it.
Sure.
And I think there's a slight difference there. Yeah.
There's never a time when any industry is on strike that people are like, this is going to be great, because it's just such you never know what's going to happen, because you're dealing with basically you're arguing with people who want to make as much money as they possibly can, most likely at the detriment of the people who work for them, because a business, yes, does not want to lose money. And, constantly people are like, well, why don't they just, make less money and give it to other people? It's like, how long have you been on this planet? I mean, yeah, that'd be great and stuff, but that's just not the way it works. So, how long and hard fought? I mean,
it's going to be a while.
Yeah, I was going to say, what are your predictions? How long this drags on?
It's hard to, it is hard to say, but from what we've been hearing from the producer's end of things, I mean, there were statements to the effect of, well, we'll wait it out so some of them start losing their houses. So they're making money. They're still making money. Yeah. As long as you're watching Netflix, they're making money, so they're not, it's going to be more of a public thing of what's the public want, I feel.
So the public will need to put pressure on the producers.
And I think initially people were like, well, who cares if, Robert Downey Jr. is not making $5 million. I think we've been pretty good at putting it out there that it's about me and Tony who are just, paying off our houses in suburbs, and that helps. Of course, they've done themselves no favors by making some statements that, saying, well, we can't afford it on their yachts. We can't afford to give them more money.
I have to water seal this thing. And it's 4 stories for crying out loud. Yeah. And it's tough because I don't think, it's easy for me to have some empathy because like I know you and I know some of your friends and now I know Tony and, things like that. It's easy for me to have some empathy because I can look at it from a business aspect and like a humanity aspect of like, you have to feed your families. We have to have
insurance.
It's just a fucking job, but I think the further you get from either coast, you start losing that connect, and people are just like, why do they feel so bad? Well, Tony's an actor. He's obviously a millionaire. They just don't get it.
Today's political climate doesn't help with that. So we're already sniping at each other, as it is. So making that point to some people is harder.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. But I know that like if I'm having a conversation back home and somehow it comes up, my buddy Tony is an actor in LA, and that you can just tell that people assume a lot of things that just are not true.
Yeah. There's that stat that like 87% of actors can't pay they don't make $40,000 a year to then pay for
to get insurance. Right. Yeah. To be qualified for insurance.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. And
and we don't live in a cheap town either.
Yeah. So, and I don't think that the average person understands that there are, there's pensions and retirements and health insurance down the line that come into play. Like these are unions and they're negotiating for the things that all other unions negotiate for. And, while someone will go to a movie and enjoy it and spend $20 for a ticket, then they get mad because their movies aren't being made because somebody wants to be able to rent their house. It's insane. It's insane. But it's that disconnect of, middle America not even understanding the way it works. So hopefully something like this will help educate people a little bit because it's just people just don't know, and you don't know what you don't know. So figuring out a way to communicate that to people so that they can put some pressure on the money guys and say, hey, look, we're not going to go see your product unless you make it right, would be ideal.
Well, it's interesting. I asked that very early on. I was like, why are we not calling for a boycott? And I guess I guess we don't do it because it would hurt ourselves to some degree.
You mean a boycott of the streamers?
Yeah.
I do. I mean, if somebody asked me what
from the
what
first
I do-
day, I was thinking
and
that.
I think for some people, there is still a misconception that if we call for a boycott, that somehow that's going to affect our bottom line. But we're not getting any residuals as it is, so it's not going to. It's like if we were getting money from Netflix and we said don't do it to Netflix, then that would be a different thing.
I wonder why our guilds don't ask for that.
Well, Netflix has been one of the more forward people of like, well, let's get this fixed.
Yeah.
As opposed to the big studios.
Got it.
Yeah, because, they're hungry for content.
And honestly, being on the outside of it, calling for a boycott, I don't think you would get nearly enough people to boycott to have it have the impact it would need to have, because most people are just going to be like, no, that's the only place my kid watched Bluey, man. Like how am I going to shut that off?
I think even if you got 5 or 10% of people to boycott, it would have a big effect.
I agree.
I think there's some reason. Maybe it's silly, but I don't think it's silly, actually. I always have really liked, I don't know, I've had trust in the union. Every time I've heard the leaders of our union like speak, and they're doing, like, a lot of them are doing it not as a job, like they're doing it for the
because they believe in
union.
Yeah.
And they're smart, man. They're like usually they're writers and lawyers and stuff like that. And they're smart.
And this is the first time in like 2 decades that both guilds are
so clearly something's going on.
Right.
Yeah.
I mean, it was the directors were on strike for like a day.
Yeah.
And, I'm not going to, give them a hard time. I think part of it is because there's some producers in the Directors Guild as well. So it helps them. But their demands are different.
Yeah.
And so they have a different thing, but I was like, okay, this is it. Directors, writers, and actors all,
It would be weird it's really important to say the brunt. I mean, not that actors aren't taking brunt and writers, but like the real brunt
100%
is like below the line, like the production designers, the makeup people,
wardrobe, hair,
all that.
100%.
Because they are not as used. I mean, I feel like, they also have the unstable job, but I think they tend to go more like job to job a little bit easier than writers sometimes. So, and they're not paid as much when they do that job. Right. So they need that work more than anyone.
And they don't get the residuals we get. They don't get any of these other.
Right.
So the benefits that we're going to get out of this, they're not going to see it.
They're not seeing any of that.
And so, I feel completely terrible for my friends that are production people, because they have nothing to say or do in the process right now. They're just kind of
at the mercy of when this gets decided.
100%,
Yeah. And I think that's another thing. I'm glad you brought it up, because I think that's another thing people don't think about it. I think on the last writer's strike, I think Jimmy Fallon kind of mentioned it and pointed out he paid his writers for a while.
Well, that's what they're doing with their podcast this time around. All 5 of the late night hosts are having a joint podcast. Oh. And all the money is going to go to their production people.
Oh, nice.
Yeah.
It's important. Like, it's a really brutal. I also just to your point about saying this is how business works. Like, people want as much as they can get, and then until that becomes a problem, and then they'll give in. Right. So that's what this strike is ultimately. And then I just, it's worth saying that these are these Netflix and things, Disney, these are huge corporations with stocks. And so what we've unfortunately legislated in this country is they are beholden to their stockholders to make as much as they can. So it's almost their imperative to make as much as they can and cut costs as much as they can, and not to keep making good money, but it doesn't work. If you keep making the same, that doesn't help your stock price. It's to keep going, almost exponentially.
Make those margins greater and greater. Yeah.
Keep going up with your profits.
I mean, have you walked into a Target lately? How many check lanes are there? You know what I mean? It's insane. It's $1 billion company, and you can't get anybody to help you because they want to they send everybody home so that they can make more money. And it's the same idea. They've got their stockholders, and they're going to
You just try to get as much profit as you can.
Yep.
It's sad.
But to that end, it will affect the stockholders.
Yes.
If nothing is being made.
Yeah.
They're not going to make
they
any
have
money.
to at some point.
Yeah, they're not going to make any money. And that's why, there's higher leverage on, say, Warner, because they were already having some issues prior.
Right.
So they, like Warner has retooled and gotten rid of a lot of, projects. They cut out several movies that were in the can almost. And so now they're going to have nothing. It will catch up to some of them. Yeah.
One other thought on the writers deal. Feature writers have gotten fucked a lot because I have friends who are feature writers where they wrote a thing, they got their script optioned. Okay, now do rewrites. And they have them doing rounds and rounds of rewrites for a year, and they're not getting paid for that. Mm-hmm. They get the initial payment for the thing, they're rounds with the promise that, and when we make it, then you'll get paid again. And then sometimes there are the stories, there are plenty of them, where they do rounds and rounds. So they're doing free work for a year, and then they don't make the movie, and they never got paid for any of it. So that's one of the also stipulations in the new deal.
To piggyback on that, they've gotten these deals where it happens a lot, like Lifetime. They will shoot it as a low budget, so the producer gets the writers and the director and the actors at a lower cost, and then they will sell it to Lifetime for full price. And for some reason, you don't see any of that. Nothing happens about that. Yeah. When in theory, the contract says if it does get purchased, that's when we get paid, right? And
get your boy.
Tony's cat is currently rubbing up against my microphone,
making love to the microphone.
And I was going somewhere else with that. I'm having a
senior moment.
Okay, we were talking about. Never mind.
The Lifetime thing.
Well, we were talking about the Lifetime thing, but I was trying to remember where that was going, because there's another part of it that where they're trying to skirt around and what I wish we would have, and this is the big sticking point, is they don't want to let anybody know the numbers for who's streaming,
right?
How many eyeballs.
The latest Writers Guild thing was the producers had a media they called for a media blackout. They then finally came with their first counter offer, first proposal after our strike had been going on for 3 months. They hadn't met with us.
Wow.
They finally came with their first proposal. We then negotiated on that proposal, and I was getting really optimistic at this point. We negotiated on the proposal for 10 days. And we'd come back with counter proposals and been talking these things through. They then released a proposal from 10 days earlier, their one proposal to the public. Thinking, these numbers look good. It's going to turn the public against the writers.
Right.
Dirty.
But it was and some of their numbers, I don't know. Certain percentage raises on certain things, on minimums. They look good. They're good.
Yeah.
The only problem is that job might not even exist. Also,
right in a vacuum, it looks like those are nice.
Those are nice numbers. Yeah. But if the jobs don't even exist, again, if we don't address the things about having writers have a viable career at this thing, and chances for jobs,
because for episodic network and for commercials, there are clearinghouses that will track how many times something is played on network television. That's how we get our residuals. We don't have any way of tracking them.
Oh, yeah. That was what I was getting to with the contract. They did agree to share confidentially, which I think is a great idea, a way to do it, and keep their, secrecy around how well they're actually doing. Share confidentially with 6 people at the guild, right? And that was cool. I was great.
I would be fine with that.
I'd be fine with that.
It's better than nothing,
wait.
I guess.
And then 3 years from now, we can decide how we'd implement that to give you residuals. So they weren't giving us anything. They were just offering to confidentially share some numbers with us. What does that do?
Yeah, exactly.
What is that?
And they're going to have to self-report. I mean, there's really no other way.
Well, and that's what the clearinghouses are for. Is so they're not really self-reporting. It's all this data goes to this clearinghouse so that we don't have it, they don't have it, the clearinghouse has it, and they don't tell anybody anything, but they do give you the money.
But I mean, with television, when it's airing. So it's a lot easier to track.
Not necessarily, though.
But I mean, it's airing.
Yeah, but it could be airing somewhere in Europe.
right, but there's still it's still tracked, like, and not necessarily by the production company or their channel. Like, somebody's got a TV guide, and it's like, hey, this is on at this time. So with streaming, that doesn't happen at all because you don't know. I don't know when you're watching Emmanuel in space. I don't know.
For commercials, it's even a bigger thing.
All the data, though. It's more clear than ever. They have more data. They know exactly how long someone watched it and all that. Yeah,
they have it, but it's obviously easier. That's why they have to self-report.
They don't want to share it, but they don't want to share it because, number one, they can say a show is XYZ popular and they don't have to prove it.
Right. It helps. Again, it goes back to the shareholders and the stocks. Like, if it looks like your business isn't
right, which is a detriment actually to the shareholders too, because if the shareholders don't know any more than we do what the actual numbers are.
Well, and I think Netflix saw a little bit of that too when they kind of ran into trouble. Was it like a year or two ago when they weren't doing that great and they kind of overextended themselves, and then they just kind of talked their way out of it. They're like, yeah, but Wednesday, look, there's Wednesday, and then it's like, oh, they must be successful now, and then it just kind of went away.
So I mean, again, it's a good step, and it's exactly why, like, I was like, okay, good step. Okay, you're gonna show us like some numbers. That's cool. And now, like, we've had formulas for residuals. Like, they'll figure it out. Like, you can't just say, oh.
I mean, there are smart money and accounting people that can figure. I mean, because we figure it out. Like, this show cost X amount of dollars, and we paid this actors in it for the writer has this much input. And every time it's shown, blah. I mean, I get it. Some people on streaming are going to start a show, not finish it.
So what does that count for? Yeah,
I get that. So
figure it out.
But you can do a percentage of a percentage. I mean, like, if they would just give the numbers, if they would just reveal the numbers, the math would not be hard.
I don't think so either. So one guy watched it for 5 minutes, another watched the whole thing. You take 5 and add that together, and then divide it by how many people are in it.
Yeah, we weren't asking for numbers. We were asking for residuals.
Right. But I'm like, if they can come up with the numbers, then you can figure out the residuals.
We'll figure that out.
I'm not even good at math, and I kind of have a cursory idea of how you could do it.
100%.
It's insane. I'm still stuck on the writing, rewriting.
For feature writers, and they did do they did a give on that. Again, it was there was some great writer released the press release for our rebuttal to their proposal or response to that, which they because they put it into the media, was like it was something like, it's not nothing and it's not nearly enough. So they did do a second step where there was like, meaning you get the option, you pay for that, but then you also have to pay for the rewrites.
Yeah.
But they only did it for original screenplays, not adapted screenplays. So it's like, okay, so you're halfway there. You have to give it for the adapted. They're all working hard. Like, you know what I mean? Like,
just because it's an adapted screenplay doesn't mean
they're not also doing the work.
Exactly.
But it doesn't mean that they're going to be any happier with the
rewrites and all that. Yeah. So
as a photographer, like, it's pretty standard to just be like, all right, look, you got 10 images, and I'll do some basic like beauty edits to the images. And then you can give me 5 requested additional edits. Anything past that, I'm going to have to start charging you more. I would think writing common sense would be kind of the same. Like, okay, I'll give you 5 rewrites, but then if you come back to me and want more rewrites, it's going to cost you money.
Totally.
I mean,
exactly.
That's I think it'd be pretty simple.
For you guys, it's much more important because, I mean, yes, we have reshoots, but in general,
you get paid for them.
We get paid for them, and it costs a lot.
So they don't want to do a ton.
They don't want to do a lot of those, right? Yep. Unless you're.
But they can have someone, because it doesn't hurt them at all to just have you do rewrite after rewrite.
Right.
Just the carrot stick is just dangling along.
And if you don't like it, they'll just bring somebody else in to do the rewrites. It's like, it's shitty.
Well, no, then they'd have to pay somebody if they did. Yeah. If they brought somebody else in, they're not going to do it for free. Right?
They know the person's going to want that chance to have the movie get made.
Right.
So they're going to, they can just hold that carrot stick out.
Yeah. And sometimes there's no carrot. They just beat you with it. Yep. It sucks. It's just, and I think very few people realize how similar to any other industry it is. There aren't 8-year-old kids working in a smelting room, but like still people deserve to be compensated for their work. Period. Like, I don't know if there's any unreasonable statement being made there, but yet, meanwhile,
right. I mean, and much like, and that's the thing. Like most every other job, you are a key piece of how the money is made. And I'm not going to argue that it's more in our industry, but without a writer and actor, you have without a story, without actors, you don't have product. we are the product essentially, and and I'm not trying to be full of ourselves by saying that, and to have us be on the low end of what's being divvied out is somewhat distressing, especially when we're trying to make a living and live in this town.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think if a crankcase was sentient, it would say the same thing. Like, you cannot make this vehicle without me. Like, how dare you not pay me? Like, it makes perfect sense. I wanted to ask, you talked about the extras being scanned without knowing why they were being scanned. Did they know? They knew they were being scanned, though.
No, they did a body scan, a picture. They just went in and did a full scan. They weren't told why they were doing it. They just go to the wardrobe and get scanned. It's not, and it wasn't in any contract,
right?
But it was for perpetuity. Yeah, and it's like, and that's the problem with AI is this perpetuity thing. Is like, for actors, that's where AI comes in. Is like, okay, once you have my voice, say, okay, and you say, I have that. What can you do with that? Can you make me say things that I didn't say?
Yes,
all this
yes, you
stuff.
can. Yeah,
and
easily.
And that's a big deal.
Well, it's crazy to me. I think it even probably needs to go further than the entertainment industry. There needs to be some legislation about owning you. You know, I mean, it's not fair that there's the Gal Gadot is being deep faked into sex scenes on Pornhub. You know what I mean? Like that shouldn't be happening. But currently, there's nothing illegal about it, which is fucked up.
Yeah.
And you also shouldn't be able to take a school superintendent and for shits and giggles say, make them say that they're pro-Nazi or whatever, like all that stuff. And it's not. I mean, I suppose in that instance, you could maybe go for a libel clause or something, but because it's malicious. But other than that,
I agree that there needs to be a legislative part of this. I really do, because like I keep going back to IP, but I mean, corporations are fierce about their own IP. Right. Like don't touch brands.
Right. Good point.
Yeah, and they will go after people like monsters. Yeah. But when it comes to us, well, this is ours.
Yes, you are your IP.
We are our IP. It's not like I'm not going to go out and be my character. Maybe you have your eyes on any projects or any ideas that you want to start shooting out there?
I was in a writer's room. We were 2 weeks in when the strike hit, and it's a spinoff of Dexter. So I'm excited about that. I'll tell one last synchronistic story. You can always edit if I've gone too long here.
No, you're good to
go. So that same girlfriend who told me you need to go to acting class had a friend in her building. Okay. And we all hung out, and he was super cool guy. And we immediately clicked because we were both really into movies and music and plays and film and all of it. Right. And TV and all of it. And we remained friends, and he became a director for Home Shopping Network. But like really rose up the ranks and like controlled, like he had like employees under him and was like, he was in charge of a division there,
right.
As a creator director. And I became a writer. And I remember my first job on Feed the Beast, I posted on Facebook. He was the first person who called me immediately. Like it was like the next second. And I hadn't talked to him in like a year,
Right.
And he was like, dude, I'm just so happy for you. And he'd had periods of time where he'd like early 20s where he'd want to be a writer and had an agent. He'd gotten that far. And I will preface this with saying he's like massively talented and brilliant to talk to. So this is also just a cool story of the meritocracy that does exist and dreams do come true in this business, is that he quit his job at Home Shopping Network and told me, I'm doing it because I want to finally, I've always wanted to be a writer and I'm going to do it. And of course, at that time, I was like, dude, we're older now. Like, I was, I guess, like 5 years into my career or something. I'm like, it's not that easy and And then he sent me his pilot. And I remember scrolling because he's the funniest human being I've like ever met. He's like hilarious. I mean, his wit is just incredible. And I scrolled down just to see like what he'd sent. and it was 60 pages. And I was like, oh, it's a drama. It's not a comedy. And I was like, okay. And I read it and I was like, holy fuck, this is like really good. But I always read things twice. So I'm like, now I'll read it again and really see what's really here, because I'm just sort of taking it in the first time.
Right.
I read it again and I was like, shit, I have no notes. It's fucking brilliant. And I met with him and we sat down and he said, what do you think? And he still laughs this day. He was like, if you had said it sucked, like I might not, have done anything.
Yeah.
And I was like, it's brilliant. You'll get it. I guarantee you will get work out of this. I guarantee you couldn't not. It's too good. It's so brilliant. And, who knows? Like, maybe you could sell it. Saying that, being like, that I know how hard that is to come in, having never worked in TV before.
Right.
He had, again, had managed people and things that I now realize really set him up for what he ended up doing. But about 6 months later, he spent 6 months like shopping that around, and about 6 months later, he called me up and was like, dude, I think it's happening. Like, I think we're going to sell this thing.
Mm-hmm.
And I met him and he had got, there was a bidding war started for his show. Wow. And he got 2 seasons at Amazon for a show and he'd never written before.
Wow. Yeah, well,
off of a pilot and a pitch. Now, again, I've worked for him because my last job was working as the number 2 on Them with him, season 2 of Them on Amazon. And it is something I will shamelessly promote again and again because I don't know, it's just the most, like, how do I explain it? It's the closest to, I've loved pretty much everything I worked on. I've actually really believed and loved, like, immensely. It just feels, it's, how do I explain it? It feels less like TV than like a really interesting, weird independent movie when he does his work.
Right.
So it's the closest to like when I first wanted to like write. Right. It's like that kind of stuff for me.
That's fantastic.
And the first season is on Amazon already, and it is a very hard watch but brilliant. I highly recommend checking it out, and it has something to say. It's meaningful, and it's dark, and it's weird, and it's fucking powerful. And brilliantly done. And I am lucky enough to have gotten to be on the second season. It will come out in January, apparently, because of the strike. That's the new time period. But yeah, so that is a guy who my old friend synchronistically sent me that pilot. That got
him rolling.
I got him rolling. And then a year later, he was like, we're doing the second season. Are you available? And I said, And he actually, we had been working on an idea on the side a little bit, and he was like, "Oh shit, you like are a good writer, and we work well together because we're friends, but how do you know?
Yeah, you don't. Yeah.
So he took the gamble on me, and I thought it went really well, and we're playing around with some stuff, so I'm hoping for something the two of us can do together.
Looking forward to that.
Yeah, absolutely, and it's always nice to land on a positive after all the heavy strike talk and stuff.
Right.
It's nice to hear a happy story.
Dreams do come true.
It benefited both of you, and you guys are having a blast. And man, Tony, I can't stress enough like how much we appreciate you being able to come in and share your story with us. And really, we now have an insight like into who you are and how that formed all the things that you've worked on that people have enjoyed. And I can't thank you enough. Just thank you for what you do.
Thank you. I appreciate that so much.